For 6 years, Sophie had played the perfect wife in the quiet suburbs of Surrey. Her days began before sunrise, carefully preparing Edward's breakfast, ironing his shirts, scrubbing the floors until they gleamed, and caring for their cheerful little daughter, Lily. Her only break was the afternoon walk to the market, where she'd stretch every pound to keep the household running on the money Edward transferred, when he remembered. Each month, Sophie had to send a message, always polite, always phrased just right. "Edward, love, could you please send this month's living allowance when you have a moment?" And each time, the silence that followed made her chest tighten. Edward was a man of precision and control, a senior analyst at a financial firm in London. To the world, he was refined, successful, an ideal family man. But at home, his words stung like winter wind. "You are a servant, Sophie. A useless one at that," he once muttered while barely looking up from his phone. He said it again a week later. And then once more, without remorse, like it was simply fact. Sophie bore it all in silence. Until the day she could not. It was a rainy Tuesday when the dam finally cracked. Sophie had just finished folding Edward's laundry and was spoon-feeding Edward's elderly mother, who had been living with them since the stroke. Lily came running into the kitchen, her eyes lit up. "Mummy, can we get the lemon drizzle cake again? The one from Mr. Ahmed's shop?" Sophie smiled, but it faded just as quickly. Her purse was empty. She had received nothing this month. "Not today, darling. Mummy has to wait until Daddy sends the money." Lily paused, puzzled but obedient. "That's okay, Mummy. Maybe next week," she whispered, and ran off to play. Sophie stood frozen, the spoon still in her hand, something in her spirit beginning to fracture. That night, she stared at her reflection, no longer recognizing the weary woman before her. The next morning, Sophie took Lily by the hand and walked her to the train station. But instead of heading to the park or the market, they stepped onto the train to London. She had one destination in mind, Edward's office. When they arrived, Sophie marched through the reception without flinching. The receptionist recognized her at once. "I'm here to deliver Edward's responsibilities," Sophie said calmly, placing Lily gently on the lounge sofa. "Tell him his daughter is waiting." She turned around and left, her heels clicking against the marble floor, the stunned silence behind her confirming one thing: something had changed. Back home, she made no dinner. She didn't clean. She didn't check on Edward's mother. She just sat quietly in the kitchen and opened her laptop. It was time. The next few days passed in a quiet rebellion. Sophie no longer folded Edward's clothes, no longer answered to the sharp buzz of his text messages. She did not clean the hallway where his muddy shoes once stood proudly. Instead, she turned her attention inward, towards herself. Lily adjusted quicker than expected. She was happy to eat toast and jam for dinner, delighted when Sophie let her stay up reading storybooks on the sofa. The only thing missing, truly missing, was stability. That would come soon, Sophie told herself. On the third morning, after dropping Lily at school, Sophie stepped into a small corner cafe in Guildford. She wore a simple blue blouse and carried her CV in a leather folder. The cafe owner, a silver-haired woman named Janet, looked up and smiled. "You're not here for coffee, you?" she asked knowingly. Sophie returned the smile. "I need work. Something honest. Something that's mine." By the end of the day, she was hired. It was part-time, but it was enough to breathe. That evening, Edward returned home late. The house was in silence. No hot meal waited. His mother's carer had not arrived. His phone buzzed once. It was a message from Sophie. "Edward. I've taken a job. Your mother will need someone to care for her during the day. You'll need to manage Lily's pickup on Wednesdays and Fridays." There was no greeting. No apology. Just the facts. He stared at the message, confusion slowly twisting into something colder. The next morning, Edward approached her in the kitchen. "Is this how it's going to be now? You ignoring me like I'm not your husband?" Sophie placed the teacup on the counter and looked up, her voice clear. "Are you asking because you miss me, Edward, or because you've lost control?" He blinked. "You're the mother of my child. This family needs order." Sophie stepped past him, reaching for her coat. "This family needs respect. And money in the account. I'll text you when Lily's lunch funds run low." Without waiting for a reply, she left. But as the days went on, the power balance began to shift. Edward's control unraveled, thread by thread. One Wednesday afternoon, Lily stood outside Edward's office again, holding a drawing she had made. A security guard called Edward down, who looked visibly annoyed. "You can't keep doing this," he snapped when Sophie picked her up later. "You can't keep ignoring responsibility," she answered. But Edward didn't reply. Because deep down, he knew, this was just the beginning. That weekend, Sophie checked her bank account. The balance was still empty. Rent was due. Groceries were low. Lily needed a new pair of school shoes. She took a deep breath and sent a single message. "Edward, it's the 1st of the month. Please transfer the living expenses." Minutes passed. No reply. Then, at last, a voice note. "Stop nagging. I'll send it when I can. I'm busy. Honestly, you're worse than a debt collector." Sophie held the phone to her chest. Her hands trembled. And then, like a storm cloud cracking, she whispered aloud. "Right. That's how you want to play this." She stood up, grabbed Lily's school bag, and reached for the umbrella. Because the next move was hers. The rain was falling in thick, steady drops as Sophie hurried down the pavement, Lily's hand tucked tightly in hers. Her coat was already soaked by the time they reached the pharmacy. Lily's cheeks were flushed. She had been quiet since the afternoon, her energy visibly draining. Inside, the pharmacist behind the counter frowned as Sophie explained the symptoms. "Likely a stomach virus," he said, checking the boxes. "You'll need this syrup, and these sachets for rehydration. Keep her resting and warm." Sophie nodded, reaching into her purse, but her fingers froze. There was only a single £5 note, a few coins, and her bus pass. "Could you hold these for a few hours?" she asked hesitantly. The pharmacist gave her a sympathetic look. "I'm sorry, love. I can't put medicine aside. We've had too many unpaid collections." Sophie nodded slowly and picked Lily up, who had begun to cry softly against her shoulder. Her pride screamed in silence. Outside, the wind had picked up, sweeping wet leaves along the roadside. Sophie stood under the pharmacy's awning, trying to shield Lily from the worst of it. Her hands trembled as she unlocked her phone and called Edward. It rang once. Twice. He answered with a groan. "What now?" "Edward, I need the money now. Lily's sick. She's got vomiting and diarrhea and I told you," he snapped, "I'm at work. You think I can just drop everything every time you message? You're like a debt collector. Bloody annoying. But I'm at the pharmacy, and I can't. I'll send it later. Stop calling me like this. It's exhausting." The line went dead. Sophie stood still for a moment. Her hair stuck to her cheeks. Lily coughed weakly in her arms. The lights from the pharmacy flickered above them. And then something shifted inside her, like a door she had kept bolted shut for too long had just come off its hinges. She turned on her heel and walked straight back into the pharmacy. "Excuse me," she said to the same man behind the counter. "Is there a toilet I could use for my daughter?" He nodded, gesturing down the corridor. Inside the cramped little room, Sophie sat Lily down on the lid of the toilet and knelt in front of her. "Darling," she whispered, brushing her damp fringe away. I'm going to make everything better. But I need you to stay here just for a minute, okay? Lily nodded with wide, trusting eyes. Sophie stepped out, closed the door gently, and returned to the counter. She picked up the box of syrup and the sachets. I'll be back tomorrow to pay. Before the pharmacist could protest, she turned and walked out the door, heart pounding in her chest, the bell jingling above her like a silent alarm. She knew it was wrong. But sometimes, desperation becomes its own kind of justice. That night, she held Lily tightly in their small bed, counting every breath. Tomorrow, everything would change. Because Sophie wasn't waiting anymore. The morning light filtered softly through the curtains as Sophie stared at the ceiling, her arms still wrapped around a sleeping Lily. Her heartbeat had finally slowed, but the weight of what she had done pressed heavy on her chest. She had stolen. For the first time in her life. Not out of greed. Not out of rage. But out of sheer desperation. And the world had not ended. No sirens had screamed. No knocking on the door. Just quiet. Later that morning, after Lily had eaten a slice of dry toast and curled up on the sofa with a blanket, Sophie slipped out with the receipt from the pharmacy still in her coat pocket. Her first stop was the cafe. Janet gave her a warm look as she walked in. You all right, love? You look pale. I'll be fine, Sophie answered. I just need extra shifts. Anything you've got. Janet nodded, sensing the edge in her voice. Come in Saturday and Sunday. I'll put you on mornings. Thank you, Sophie said softly. You've no idea how much that means. From there, Sophie walked directly to the town library and sat down in front of one of the public computers. Her hands hovered over the keyboard for a moment before she began typing with purpose. She registered for a free evening business course. Applied for a training program at the local adult college. Bookmarked 3 online job sites. Then she created a new email address. Sophie Reed. Not Mrs. Edward Reed. Not Sophie the housewife. Just Sophie. By noon, her phone buzzed. It was Edward. His message read. Your little stunt yesterday was disgraceful. Dropping Lily off at my office again. Grow up. She didn't reply. Another message followed. By the way, you forgot to ask for this month's money. I assume you're still playing the martyr. Still, no response. But Sophie was no longer biting her tongue. She was biding her time. At 3:30, she picked Lily up from school. They walked past the same bakery they had passed every week for months. The one with the lemon drizzle cake in the window. This time, Sophie paused. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the exact change she had saved from tips last week. Go on, Lily. Choose one. Lily's eyes widened. Really? Sophie smiled. Really? They sat on the bench outside the bakery, each with a slice in hand. The sun was warm, the cake sweeter than Sophie remembered. As they ate, Sophie's phone buzzed again. This time, it was not Edward. It was a message from the cafe's owner. Janet here. You've got heart, love. That's rare. I know someone who's hiring part-time admin help at a legal office. You interested? Sophie stared at the screen. The bench. The sun. Her daughter's laughter beside her. And the message. She typed quickly. Absolutely. Please pass on my name. Later that night, she sent Edward a message. Not a request. Not a reminder. Just a statement. Edward. From now on, I'll be covering Lily's expenses myself. You'll still need to support your mother, unless you plan to bring her home. But don't contact me unless it's about Lily. That's all. For the first time, she ended a message to him without please or thank you. She pressed send. and it felt like a door slamming shut behind her, while another one opened, just ahead. It had been nearly 2 weeks since Sophie's final message. Edward hadn't responded. Not directly. Instead, the silence grew heavier, stretching out like a fog over the remnants of their marriage. But it did not choke Sophie anymore. She breathed easier with each passing day. The legal office called on Monday. Sophie attended the interview wearing a blouse she had ironed the night before, her CV clutched in trembling hands. The manager, a woman named Ruth, scanned her file, smiled, and asked a single question. "You were out of work for 6 years. What made you come back now?" Sophie met her eyes. "Because I remembered who I was before I let someone take that from me." Ruth offered her the job on the spot. That same evening, Edward sent a short message. "We need to talk. In person." Sophie did not answer immediately. She waited until Lily had finished her bath and was fast asleep before typing back. "Tomorrow. 6:30. Outside the cafe. 10 minutes. No more." When he arrived, Edward looked different. Tired. Unshaven. His shirt collar wrinkled, no tie. The man who once corrected her posture at the dinner table now shifted uncomfortably on a bench, clutching a takeaway coffee. "You look busy these days," he muttered. Sophie folded her arms. "You said 10 minutes. Use them wisely." He scowled, clearly not used to being spoken to like that. "You've made your point, all right? With your little independence parade. But this house, it doesn't run itself. And Mum. She's your mother, Edward." "Yes, but you married into it. You made vows. You broke them first." Her words sliced through the air like cold wind. He looked at her, stunned. "You called me a useless servant. 3 times. Do you remember that?" I was angry. "No, Edward. You were entitled." He went quiet. "You want to negotiate now? Then let's talk numbers," Sophie said, pulling out a folded paper from her coat pocket. "This is a budget. What it takes to raise Lily. What it costs to keep your mother's carer 3 days a week. If you want shared custody, we'll need to put that in writing too. I'll be forwarding it to a solicitor." You already spoke to one." "I work in a legal office now." "Would you like the card?" Edward stared at the paper, then at her, his jaw clenched. For a moment, he looked like a child who had dropped his crown. "All this because I said the wrong thing," he muttered bitterly. "No, Edward," Sophie said quietly. "All this because you kept saying it, and I finally listened." Without waiting for a reply, she stood up and walked away, leaving him on the bench, coffee cooling in his hands. Back home, Lily was waiting on the sofa, still awake. "Was that Daddy?" she asked. Sophie sat beside her and brushed her hair back. "Yes, sweetheart. But he'll be okay." "Will we?" Sophie kissed her forehead. "We already are." But even as she smiled, her phone buzzed again. It was a bank alert. Incoming transfer, £1,500 from Edward Reed. The next few weeks unfolded like pages in a book Sophie thought she had forgotten how to read. Her life was no longer measured by requests and refusals, but by her own footsteps, small, sure, and growing stronger each day. At the legal office, she quickly proved herself. Sophie learned fast. She listened, absorbed, and stayed late when needed. Ruth, her manager, started giving her more responsibility, first filing, then managing appointments, then even speaking to clients. "You have a calm way about you," Ruth told her one afternoon. "Clients trust that. Use it." It was the first compliment she had heard in years that felt real. At home, the rhythm of life shifted into something simpler, something sweeter. Lily adjusted to the new routine, earlier mornings, packed lunches, quiet evenings filled with storybooks and toast. There were challenges, of course. Sophie often came home exhausted, and money was still tight. But there was a quiet pride in how she managed it all. And Edward? He paid the monthly allowance on time. He didn't say much anymore. His messages, when they came, were short and functional. Picking Lily up Friday. Paid the carer. Can she bring her raincoat next week? No more voice notes. No more barking orders. The silence, now, was peaceful. Then one morning, as she was filing away a contract, Ruth called her into the back office. "You're not in trouble," she said with a grin, seeing Sophie's worried face. Quite the opposite. She handed Sophie a small envelope. Inside was a letter, an offer. The firm wanted to keep her on permanently. Full-time. With benefits. "You're smart, reliable, and frankly better than half the trainees I've worked with," Ruth said. "It's yours if you want it." Sophie's fingers trembled as she held the paper. Her eyes blurred with tears she didn't expect. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Ruth said simply. And she did. That evening, after dinner, Sophie and Lily sat on the floor of the living room, surrounded by coloring books and empty biscuit wrappers. "Do you know what happened today?" Sophie asked. Lily looked up, crayon in hand. "Did something good happen, Mummy?" Sophie smiled. "Yes. Mummy got a real job. One with papers and a desk and tea breaks." Lily jumped up and clapped. "Like Daddy's?" Sophie laughed. "Yes, like Daddy's. But it's mine." That night, after Lily fell asleep with crayons still in her hand, Sophie sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open. She typed out a new email signature. Sophie Reed, Legal Administrator. And then, after a long pause, she opened a new document. She didn't know exactly what it would be. A journal. A letter. Maybe one day, a book. At the top, she typed a title. The Woman Who Woke Up. She stared at it for a long moment. Then she smiled, saved the file, and turned off the light. The house was quiet. Peaceful. Her own. 3 months later, the rhythm of Sophie's life had settled like a new song. Not without challenges, but filled with choice, her choice. Each morning began with a routine she had built from the ground up, preparing Lily's lunchbox, taking the early bus to the legal office, returning home to a quiet flat that no longer echoed with someone else's expectations. At work, her desk was now by the window, where the sun filtered through every afternoon. The clients who walked into the office didn't see the woman who begged for living expenses, they saw Sophie Reed, organized, articulate, and unshakable. One afternoon, while filing a case note, she paused. The name on the folder caught her eye. Edward Reed. He was filing for financial restructuring through a solicitor from another firm. Sophie blinked once. Then twice. Ruth passed behind her and noticed. "Someone you know." Sophie smiled faintly. "Someone I used to." She closed the file and carried on. No drama. No bitterness. Because she no longer lived in the world of reactions, she lived in resolve. That evening, while Lily colored a picture of their new flat, she looked up at Sophie and said, "Mummy, you look like a boss lady." Sophie laughed. "That's because I am one." And she meant it, not just in the office, but in her own life.